Hi, I'm Jim. Welcome to the Unbound Performance Podcast, where we explore the world of sports and performance mindset training.
And I'm Caroline. Each week we talk about the strategies, habits, and mental framework that help us to excel. Let's get into today's episode.
You mentioned this the other day, that mindfulness is a hot topic, breath's a hot topic. When I read any book on performance, listen to anybody talk about performance, at some point they get to mindfulness or meditation or
Because
breath
it
work.
matters.
Yes, and it's, for me, I was always aware of it being important. Never did it, even like in a martial arts setting where it was talked about. I ignored it. Thought it was weird. Wasn't going to do it. One, I don't need any help breaking anything. I'm strong, hit hard, kick hard. I'm good. I would do some visualization stuff that made more sense to me, but I generally ignored the whole mindfulness world. And then just through coaching, you're always looking for something. What's next? How can I be better? Can I help my teams be better? What do the best in whatever it is? What do they do? And kept coming back to a formal meditation, breath-based meditation program. Probably the first people where I was convinced, okay, this is a big deal. I started talking about this, doing it. I was reading about special operators doing it and having it be part of their training. Well, if somebody like that's doing it, seems foolish to ignore it.
Right.
And so part of me was kicking my own butt for years and years and years. I just ignored it, and eventually came to the point where this is crucial. At that point, though, I was generally unable to convince anyone that they should do it. And most people would agree, oh yeah, that sounds great.
Right, but it's not going to work for me.
I'm not doing it. And so it was somewhat frustrating, and I remember I'd studied this a lot, and then I read these two books by this British Tai Chi instructor, longtime Tai Chi instructor. Her name's Jayne Storey, who wrote Breathe Golf and Connected Golf. I don't know how I became aware of them, but as soon as I saw them on Amazon or whatever, I just bought them, read them, and I was like, this is it. Well, she was not. Now she does a lot of golf work, but at the beginning she was not. She found that either her Tai Chi students or their significant others were using a lot of this stuff that she was teaching them to help their golf game. So it became more and more of a thing with her, and her work isn't limited to golfers, but a lot of them are golfers. But it's a wide variety of athletic endeavors. So I remember feeling, after I read those books, I have the keys to the performance universe right here. I've said that more than once. It's this is, if people do this, they will be able to be the best they can be on a very consistent basis. But it requires training and work. You can't just if I feel nervous, I'll
breathe.
Yeah, that's not it. Yeah. And I remember, my son was playing rec baseball, and I was sitting there watching, and a mom from the other team, her son was pitching, just constant throughout the game. Breathe, just breathe. And I was starting to hyperventilate, just listening to it. But that's people have this. It's very, I don't know. I hate the Western view of all of this. I'll just tough it out, I'll grind it out. That just does not work. On the flip side, in the East, they've been talking about these practices literally for thousands of years, which I found fascinating. So when I finished her two books, I remember I emailed her and told her, what I thought, how she crushed it. And I was just grateful. Yeah. And she emailed me back. We ended up talking on the phone, which the fact that she even knew I existed was kind of shocking to me. Just such an important aspect of all of this that is almost totally ignored. Even I'll have people say, oh yeah, and they'll use a Calm app or something like that. And when it comes to performance, that's not the thing.
Right.
I don't think you should use any app, because the whole point is to
be in tune with yourself.
Yes.
Self-guidance.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have this foundation, when you are trained, the easiest thing which will have any performance thing going on anymore is sit in a chair, be on the floor, back straight, and I'm aware of my breath.
Right.
And thoughts come and go. You can't
control what comes and goes.
Right. You can just, when you catch it, just try to bring everything back to your breath. And then you learn to focus, refocus. There's a calming effect, although that's why I guess they named the app Calm. But the impact it has on your brain physically is significant. The part of your brain that deals with fight or flight or freeze shrinks. A part of your brain that is the calmer, more chill response center, that part grows. All of this with the neuroplasticity stuff, where you realize the brain is not a fixed entity, and it can adapt and grow. And
I feel like I used the Calm app for a while. More I used the sleep stories to fall asleep at night, which 5 minutes in I'm out. They're either really boring or their voices, whatever it is. But I kind of view the meditations on the Calm app as almost like a podcast sometimes. Like I feel like I'm listening to them because a lot of like the daily Calm. I don't know how familiar you are with it. I get it for free through work, so I'm like, well, whatever. But it's like a 10-minute daily. Like you can choose your meditation guidance, for however long you want to do it. But the daily one is like always has some category they're talking about, like anxiety or stress or insomnia, whatever it is. And so like they open it up with breathing for the first 60 seconds, like a little guided thing. And then there's like a moment of like silence for a minute where you just sit in silence and whatever water sounds are playing. And then the host talks about anxiety or whatever the subject is for the day for a few minutes. When I really feel like true breathwork meditation is in yourself, understanding and feeling your senses, free from this thing. I have this thing on Do Not Disturb right now, but it's still sitting next to me. It's not going to show me that anyone's calling or texting, but it's still here. And so for me, when the phone is guiding my quiet relaxation disconnect time, that doesn't make sense. I was thinking yesterday, I was getting a massage and I was getting stuffy, and she was about to tell me to start taking some deep breaths as she did some various work, and I was like, well, I can't, and so she put some peppermint oil on her hands and let me do this to clear my stuff out. And she said, I would put some on your upper lip, but sometimes it can burn because the peppermint, right? And I was like, all right, so it's on my hands, because I was like, oh, I'd rather smell my own hands than smell someone else's hands. So I'm laying there, and I ended up putting my hands on my stomach like this. So I've got peppermint oil on the palms of both hands. So now it's against my stomach, it's against the back of this hand. But it was interesting because as she was doing this work on my scalp and my head, at one point she put her hands over my ears, I think just to silence. And the immediate sensation when she covered my ears and my sense of hearing went away, and instantly the palms of my hands lit up and I felt the tingle of the peppermint. It wasn't painful, but the second she did this and the sort of ocean wave sound started to happen, I felt it. And I thought it was really interesting how obviously distracting the silent massage room with the calming spa music that was on shut that off, and my other senses woke up. And that was really interesting to me from the perspective of what we were talking about last night on text about this. Is I think people, meditation's a hot topic right now because people are, Instagram influencers are promoting it and they're doing it and it's working for them. And I think any practice is a good practice. If it works for you, it makes you feel something, then okay. But from the perspective of performance enhancing breath work and meditation, it's a different type, which is what I think is what sounds like you're talking about here. In that being able to silence out the other senses or silence out the mom yelling, breathe, so that you can be aware of what you're feeling inside, what your brain's telling you, what your body's telling you, what your last arm swing that you took that didn't feel quite right was telling you, to be able to shut those out and tune into yourself. You can't rely on this or rely on someone sitting there saying, okay, now. That's nice and it can be relaxing, but what we're talking about here as far as performance enhancing breath work and mindfulness is definitely a different ballgame.
Absolutely. I mean, there are health benefits like crazy from using a breath. I know Herbert Benson wrote The Relaxation Response and a number of other books, and he's a Harvard medical doctor. I recommend every single book he has written. Fascinating, groundbreaking. But most of his stuff has to do with health. Mm-hmm. Now, he's written at least one book that I would say is almost exclusively performance related, and performance comes up in a few of the other books as well, but mostly it's related to taking control of your health. But the people don't have any idea the impact that this can have on every cell in your body.
Literally. Physical impact on the cells in your body.
And so then when it comes to performance, just being able to quiet your mind, settle, allow yourself to kind of play unconsciously. Well, you can't talk yourself into that. You can't positive think your way into that. You can't think about technical thoughts when you're trying to do that. It's just not possible. And all you do is create mental interference that will guarantee you'll play more stiffly and less fluidly. And you'll be distracted by performance outcome thoughts and score thoughts and what happens if I miss thoughts. And the whole point of this meditation practice is to allow you to learn how to deal with those kinds of thoughts effectively and prepare for them. And when they come along, you just kind of push them aside. And that's why the best way that I have ever come across in terms of helping someone do that is a meditation-based practice, like a formal practice. You do it several times a week for 20, 30 minutes. And the vast majority of people I ever recommend that to do not want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have time. I don't think they really don't think it works.
Or they think that because they get distracted 5 minutes in, they failed at it. I think that's always
That's a huge point.
I think a lot of people think that like, oh, well, if I'm at the 5 minute mark, my phone buzzed and I grabbed it and looked at it. Like, that doesn't mean it's over. Doesn't mean that you failed at that meditation. Like, you can, even that, catching that I recognized I picked up my phone and that was not what I was supposed to do, and putting it back down is a form of mindfulness, and then making yourself tune back into what you were trying to do and finish the program process, whatever it is part of it. You have to recognize that you're going to make a mistake. And I always think it's interesting when people say, like, oh, there's no right or wrong way to meditate. I don't know if it's necessarily right or wrong. I think it definitely is what works for people who are new to meditation, or who are maybe not new to it, but just think that's not for them. Picture, like, this person.
Right.
And you're humming and you're chanting and your, like, heart's open to the sun, or like whatever all the kind of woo-woo things are that you hear. But the reality is, and you and I have talked about this, is just a moment of noticing, like feeling your heartbeat in your chest, feeling the peppermint on your hands. Like, to me, that was a mindful moment. That was a chance for me. Now, like, that wasn't a specific meditation, but the way I view that was a moment of me being mindful during a day that lots of days I don't think about doing that. I'm busy. I've got things going on. I'm thinking about my kids and doctor's appointments and gymnastics, but just recognizing that there was a moment where I noticed something that I don't typically get to notice made me feel like I took some time. I spent some time. I got in tune with myself. And so I think the more we can do that and recognize that, like you said, the thoughts you're not going to stop your thoughts. You're not going to not think about your phone, or not think about something that you have in 1 hour that starts, at the top of the hour. Learning how to recognize those thoughts, catch them, and just let them pass, and then come back to the moment.
I think the point you made too about throughout the day, that's one thing that I remember listening to Jayne Storey on a podcast, and she talked about returning to or coming back to her breath throughout the day, maybe up to 100 times a day. And it's using your breath as kind of a pivot, hinge, whatever, something that you can go back to help you center yourself a bit and kind of calm yourself down. The bad news is not all breaths are created equal.
100%.
The breath that is through your mouth from your chest, that is more of a stress-inducing kind of breath. The breath that is through your nose from your, what's called your hara or dantian, a couple inches below your belly button, a deep, slow breath. That is the one that has a calming effect. And Jim Lair, Eco, wrote a book, Breathe In, Breathe Out. Same thing. All of this stuff about how it's like breath is like superpower and it's ultimate weapon you can use, because, well, all the people who write about this and really know what they're talking about, they'll say, like, it's impossible to feel anxious or nervous or uptight or upset when you take this slow, deep breath through your nose from your abdomen. It's like physiologically impossible. So if we want to get better and better at using the breath, returning to the breath to help us, I use it for lame things like not losing my cool in sitting in traffic. Never mind, like, from a performance standpoint. Like, I know that during competition, if I'm allowed myself time and space to measure and quiet my mind and just allow myself to perform unconsciously, then I'm going to play well.
Yeah.
And it's when we get distracted. And that's the bad news for all this. Almost at every turn, people are completely unable to get a hold of what's going on in their head,
right.
Getting a hold of what's happening with their emotions. And when something goes bad, that is it. Their minds take off. That kind of mind is called the monkey mind in the East, where it just hops all over the place. Yeah. You can't control it. And that's why it's very difficult once it starts happening to kind of corral it. And sometimes it'll last, till the end of a set or whatever, and then you can, oh my gosh, I got to calm down or whatever. Yeah. Well, you don't want to have to wait till the end of a set. You
should need a full stoppage in what you're doing.
So, two, that has enormous ramifications for how we coach. If we never give them time and space to do any of this, that's unhelpful. If we are bombarding them with technical feedback during play, between plays, they're thinking technical thoughts during play, they have no chance of being in a flow state or the zone or whatever you want to call it, playing unconsciously. Yet, when I started out coaching, I coached that way. I had someone recommend The Inner Game of Tennis by Tim Galway that just shredded that whole approach to coaching. I read all the rest, Inner Game of Skiing, Inner Game of Tennis, Inner Game of Work, Inner Game of Stress, Inner Game of Music. They're all phenomenal. highly recommend any one of them. But the more we're trying to control our actions, the more we have no chance to perform well. A constant barrage of technical feedback just guarantees that we will never create a situation or an environment that allows for people to play unconsciously. Instead, we're trying to dictate from the sideline.
And it's frustrating to be on the player end of it.
Sure.
It's like, I remember so many times where, like, you're struggling, and your coach, at one point, coach gives you feedback. And it's like it's a single technical point. But then the next point happens, and maybe you were working on fixing that thing, and so something else didn't go quite as you planned, but your focus was on correcting that. And then they're correcting the thing that you didn't do right because you fixed the thing they told them before. And I felt like it was always this battle of like, but you just said. And I think it's that mindset of if players have not only the win or loss of a point as the measurement of their success in that last play, especially in volleyball where it's like stoppage to play, restart every single time. I'm well aware that what I just did didn't work. We lost the point, or I hit the ball out, or I got blocked, or whatever it was. You have the chance to refocus on the skills that we've worked on in practice this week, or have a chance just to refocus and reframe your mind. Like take a beat rather than like that constant technical strategy fix, because game time is not the time to fix things. It's not the time to work on drills. We're not running drills mid-practice. We're not changing someone's arm swing during game. If you coached well enough in practice that week, performance during the game, from a technical standpoint, should take care of itself. But you've got to give the players the space to have the reframing and resetting of the mind.
I mean, I think...
Which is very difficult.
Yeah. But it's, as coaches, we're supposed to give them what they need, not what we feel like giving them.
Right.
And so I'm a big proponent of the notion that game days are about feeling good. The more moments like that we have, the better we're going to play. And then if you have to make some tactical adjustments, that's fine. And that's where we go back to formal practice on meditation and the breath. You can, even like when you're visualizing or things like that, you'll want to have that be part of what you're doing, where you can pull it back to your breath. That way, throughout your event, whatever it is, it becomes habitual to return to your breath, to calm yourself, to quiet your mind, and to create an environment where you can perform to your capabilities. And I just don't see that happening very often. Yeah. People try to grind it out, tough it out, and I just don't think that works very well. Yeah. Even in events that are like power related, if it's a strongman competition, there's still like technique involved, and if you just are overthinking, you're in trouble.
Yeah, mind-muscle connection goes.
And that's where, like what you just said, we have this idea like we'll train the mind, and we'll train the body. Well, we're not separate. Like it is all one. Yeah. And then the more we can kind of put ourselves in the position where we are unified. I know one of the books I read, I've talked about this before, Book of Five Rings by the samurai from Japan several hundred years ago, Musashi. And he talked about how he would not train the specific strokes. What he would train was readiness and this sense of calm, only seeing what he needed to see. Everything else was not seen. And only way he could do that, and the way he trained that, was through this kind of meditation, breath work, where you use your breath to calm your mind, quiet your mind, and then allow for best performance. That seems so foreign to us. We just are so quickly and easily distracted by thoughts that are generally unhelpful. We're just used to it.
Yeah, it's part of our world.
We, every now and then, we'll stumble into kind of a flow state. Often it's here and gone, in a flash. Whereas being able to create a situation where you can allow for it to happen more readily, it is doable. Now, you're not going to be in a flow state all the time. Right. And you have to know how to maneuver through all those times where you're not in one. You also can continue to work at being able to get better at allowing for it to happen. But if you never train yourself to do it, it's not going to happen. And then just waiting for game day to like, okay, breathe, I gotta breathe.
So the mom's yelling.
Yeah, exactly.
Breath work definitely goes in hand with mindfulness and just being aware of things. And I know something for me that I used to think was such a positive about me, which was my like exercise regimen was just like go, no matter what, gotta show up, gotta work your butt off, gotta burn X number of calories. My body was getting worn out, my mind was getting worn out. I would show up not wanting to be there, but I would go anyway. I decided one day, like, I'm gonna go do this if I feel good and excited and I feel like I'm connected to my body to where I can push myself to whatever limit I want to get. But if there's a day where I don't want to, that's okay. I'm not gonna physically stress my body, my mind, because it was both. It wasn't just that I was overworking physically, but I was also overworking my mind. Like, I knew I should be resting my body because you can't build muscle when you're murdering them every single day. The outward expectation of needing to go and needing to be that consistent control person. And I found that once I let myself free of that, like, you have to do this, other things in my life became a thought process of, am I feeling this? Is this making me feel excited? Am I eager to do this? Do I have the mental and physical energy to exert like this today? Has translated into relationships in a positive way. I always joke that like my cup is full, my circle's full. I have this many friends, and if it leads onto this hand, then like one of these has to go. Like I know my capacity. Being able to judge in that world of exercise and fitness, which I love doing that, but I thought it had to be this like constant, intense, aggressive like anger every single day. And some days it is, and that's still fun for me. But it translated into other things where I just am such a better gauge of myself, of how I'm feeling about things. When I'm out with my friends and everyone's drinking, do I want to drink? Do I want to drink? Or do I feel compelled to do that because they are? Or do I want to go to girls' night because everyone's like, woohoo, but I'm just not feeling it? Like, would I rather stay home with my family? It's given me this great ability to measure how I feel about so many more things beyond exercise. And it was a practice. It was something where I decided I was going to do it in this one area of my life. And suddenly I was like, oh, like everything is better. Breathwork or mindfulness can translate in so many ways. So I think that's just for the people who were like, oh, it's not for me, it doesn't work well. It translates in more ways than just the one thing you're trying to correct or adjust.
Well, I think you become more aware across the board.
Yeah.
So I know that's one of the hurdles anytime I'm trying to talk to anybody about this. I'm not good at it. I tried it once. I stink at it.
I fall asleep. I love that one.
It's true. It's like, that's fine. Like the whole sense of judgment in removing that.
Right.
I know it sounds really, in your term, woo-woo. If you're in the middle of a performance, are you going to play well, perform well when you're judging what you're doing?
Right.
No chance. I don't care what it is. Playing the piano, dancing, singing, giving a presentation at work. If you have this dialogue in your mind, like, oh, I should have said that. That was stupid.
Right.
Oh, I forgot to say this.
Yeah.
Well, then you're in trouble. Like
Right.
you're not going
to miss the mark.
to be very appealing.
Yeah.
Never mind, playing a sport. If you take the same approach to meditation that you take to everything else, where you're just getting in your own way, you're not going to be good at it, quote unquote. But the point of you don't win meditation. It's just a way. I've read so many of these kinds of books where it's like you can't catch it or something. But it's very feel-oriented beyond just what you can grab right in front of you in a concrete way. Because our entire existence is more than what we can touch that's right in front of us. And the same goes for the performance world. The less conscious you are, the quieter your mind, the smoother your performance.
Well, I mean, from that perspective, I would argue too that for the player who knows how to do that, how to stay level-headed, if you will, for lack of a better, even on a day where their physical performance isn't hitting it, if they can not be the player that's not playing well and therefore they're out of control and yelling at teammates and not reacting well to the situation, or their coaches are being disrespectful, and they can continue to still just be a good teammate or a good supporter, or maybe their physical game isn't on, but they stay on the court anyway, but they're still able to get the rest of their teammates in check and support them and still do their job without particularly physically performing and like scoring points in that perspective. That can be just as powerful as being able to still physically perform and hit the ball as hard as you normally do, or serve that exact spot. I mean, yes, we're talking about physical performance. There are more facets to an athlete than just their physical output. Confidently believe that this type of ability to focus and concentrate and recenter can make when one of your facets isn't hitting, the other ones can get that much stronger, and you don't just completely fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, I think it allows for you to be the best you can be on that day.
Okay.
More consistent basis. That doesn't mean then I'm going to sink every putt. I'm going to make every shot. It does allow you to perform at a more consistently high level. And even on days where you're not 100%, well, I can be 100% of the 70% I've got right now. And instead of, I've only got like 70%, and then you wind up giving like way less than 70%.
Well, you undercut yourself on a day when you that's that kind of, you pretty much just said it, that quote of like, you can't give 100% every day, but on days that you have 70%, you give that, then you've given 100%.
Right.
Like we can't go full speed everything. Like we weren't built to do that. And so when you have the confidence, okay, this is what I've got to give, and I'm going to give my best in this capacity, then you feel accomplished. Rather than like, oh, you know what, I'm not at 100 today, like bummer, I'm only at 70, so I'm just going to function at 70. You can still find success in that 70 if you're giving it your all within that.
Bob Rotella, he talks about if you could just plug in this strategy, I'll get these results. And sports would just be a lab experiment instead of a constant test and challenge of our competitive spirit, our ability to manage thoughts and emotions in a way that will help us do well. So just put yourself in position where you can compete. Apart from like, oh, well, I can only really compete if I'm feeling 100%. Odds are you're not going to be very competitive.
Right.
And so all of this just allows for us kind of more consistently be able to tap into our resources to find other ways to contribute, whatever. If my knees are hurting or if my shoulder hurts or whatever, okay, what else can I do? And instead of getting blown apart, that's where, a formal meditation practice, plus there are ways to meditate beyond just sitting there. There are movement meditations that allow for you to be able to kind of consistently tap into this. Playing golf, for instance, where you are walking, you learn how to do this when you're walking, or standing meditation where you learn how to feel this, like lowering your sense of gravity, or to like that hara center where you kind of sink more into the ground. On a golf perspective, again, like you're driving against that ground to generate force. I remember the first time I had read about that, I think in Jayne Storey's book, Connected Golf, she talks all about like the standing and walking meditations. And I remember standing there, and it brought back to me the whole martial arts thing. Oh, I remember these stances now, and it all comes back to have this lowered center of gravity, what that does for you in terms of a force generating aspect. All of this is related to a meditation breath practice that if it's ignored, you're just not going to be able to consistently perform to your capabilities. I remember failing when I was like, Michael Jordan meditated, Kobe Bryant meditated, LeBron James still meditates, Tiger Woods meditates, all these ridiculously accomplished individuals.
Not to be ignored.
Yeah, at some point, that's when it hit me. What am I doing? Not thoroughly investigating this. Musashi, in his book, he has all these phrases that he'll end sections with, this should be investigated thoroughly. That book it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's no mystery as to, if you read Bruce Lee's books or Thich Nhat Hanh, who's this Buddhist monk, whole discourses on the breath, its impact on every part of our life. Then it cuts across all cultures and religions. Like I don't care if it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all have these traditions. It goes back to your breath. And Herbert Benson, he talks at length about adding that kind of faith-based chant or mantra to your breath work. Simple phrasing, but he talked about, like from a health standpoint, that had huge ramifications in terms of making all of this even more impactful. I think his last book was called The Relaxation Revolution. Phenomenal. I started with the first one, The Relaxation Response, and just read whatever 8 of them. I know one of the things in there, I may have talked to you about this before, but he had heard about these Buddhist monks over near Tibet who could use meditation to control their body temperature. And a woman had gone there in the 50s and noted that these monks could lay in the snow and elevate their body core temperature to the point they would melt the snow. And so he got permission from the Dalai Lama to take some doctors over there, and they trucked it up these mountains. And this is all on video on YouTube. Just punch in Herbert Benson, Tibetan monks, pops up. The first guy they hooked up these sensors to, he could raise the temperature in his hands and feet 16 to 17 degrees through meditating. And then there were these other monks, different mountains, they had to climb another one, where they used meditation to elevate their body core temperature to the point they would dry these soaking wet linens. So they're sitting there in nothing but shorts or loincloths, whatever they were wearing. Temperatures in the low 40s. They'd drape these soaking wet linens across their backs, and they would meditate, and they would dry the linens. And you can see in the video, like the steam coming off them. And his point wasn't to develop novel ways of drying sheets. It was to show what was possible.
Yeah, how capable.
From a health standpoint, he talked, 80 to 90% of all our trips to the doctor's office are stress related. So we find ways to all of a sudden manage that, do a lot better stress wise. The impact that has on our health is gigantic. Never mind, you transfer that to a performance situation where you're feeling stressed and anxious. You have ability to calm that, quiet that. That's a magnificent advantage.
Yeah.
And very few had that. I've read this quote. I think it's in Jayne Storey's new book, actually, The Athlete's Ascent. She had a quote, Kobe Bryant, talking about Steph Curry and how he was so dangerous because he had this ability to be calm in the storm, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing the quote, but it made me look up the actual, like the interview where Kobe said it, found it on YouTube. And it's a great description of what's possible if you do this. Steph Curry is another person who does this. Yeah.
I'm shocked at that.
But then your ability to keep your cool when all what's breaking loose, I mean, it's just an immeasurable advantage. You just much more consistently play well. That doesn't mean we're all become robots where we just sink every shot, and then sports would be boring for those watching and those
I think it's
playing.
important to remember that this is not intended to create a response where we necessarily score more points. Performance is not always a point scoring measurement. So we look at Steph Curry as someone who can just hit a 3-pointer from anywhere just because. There are certainly sports where you can't have a Steph Curry or Michael Jordan where you can just win because that one person's really good. So how does your actual performance from as a teammate perspective in the sports where very specifically, and volleyball is very much one of them. Like, I love when people are like, hey, we're going to have an intramural volleyball team. You want to play with us? We need someone to score points. And I'm like, well, I need someone to pass and set to me before I can score a point for you, right? Performance can be a broad measurement. It's not always going to result in scoring more points, but if you have a job to do, being able to perform at your highest level as often as possible is the result.
Yeah, I mean, this practice gives you a chance to play well more often.
Right.
And it gives you a chance to manage your thoughts and emotions when there's a lot of pressure and stress. Stakes are high and all that kind of thing. I can't recommend, I don't know of any tool or hack that is more important to adopt than this in terms of helping your performance, your health, your attitude, your spirituality. It should be thoroughly investigated. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unbound Performance Podcast.
Your support helps us continue to build our community. If you're enjoying this content, please like, subscribe, and share.